when you talk about the Chinese banking system, let's assume that it has to restructure. What they'll do, they're very smart. The people that run the PBOC and SAFE.
Let's talk about this. Here's how smart they are. When we went over with Trump's visit, remember, they didn't make any other changes. They weren't going to let us in on anything else after that, except they would open up the finance sector.
Says the spider to the fly.
Exactly. That's
They've already wrecked their financial system.
Oh, we'll open
and now you can invest.
Now
right?
you can invest.
Why does the world not see this, Steve?
The world absolutely sees this.
They're starting to see it.
Hang on. No,
Kyle. The world's economists are just starting to see this.
No, Kyle. You are much too kind. You're a good man, okay? You've got to call it like it is. It's bullshit. Okay, they know exactly. You're telling me the guys in the Wall Street Journal, the Financial Times of London, the Economist, these smart guys in these think tanks don't know exactly what's going on? Some moron like me can look at the balance sheet of these banks and say, hey, guess what? I think we have a ticking time bomb, right?
But you know what they say? But it's China. That's what I hear all the time. I agree with you, but it's China. So we're going to keep writing what we write.
Yeah. That's got to stop. China must be, okay, we cut a deal with them in the late 90s. Remember, you had a spectrum back then of the China cheerleaders, the rational accommodationists, and the hawks. Okay, so let's talk about this. Back in 99, that was the pitch from the appeasers. And people have to understand it's both political parties. This is not about ideology. This is all Democrats and Republicans, okay? Yeah. When they're talking about China, they're just trying to figure out how to get more money in their own pockets. So the cheerleaders said exactly what, hey, it's China. Once we get them into the most favored nations, once we get them into the WTO, they're going to turn out to be liberal capitalists. They're going to, they're going to vote.
Liberalize their economy. They're going to democratize. They're going to let us invest in everything.
They're going to be middle class.
Yeah.
They're going to be.
It's going to create a rule of law. Maybe?
Rule of law. It's going to be nirvana, and they're going to be okay. So we know 17 years later. Guess what? They're a totalitarian regime, mercantilist regime. They've got a system that works for them, for the elite, for their regime, and it works well. Now you have two sets of folks. The cheerleaders are gone. Nobody's a cheerleader. You have rational accommodationists and you have hawks. Rational accommodationist has got a new name. It's Thucydides' trap. It's your buddy Graham Allison and Henry Kissinger. And here's the great concept they got, okay? Their great concept is America's a declining power. China's a rising power, like Athens was a declining power and Sparta was a rising power. Yeah. And what you have to figure out to avoid a global conflict, which is like 16 times in world history this has happened, and 12 times they just weren't wise enough to take it. What has to happen is the declining power can figure out how to nudge the rising power to kind of get into their system. Now, you'll always be the junior partner, but you'll make the big guy kind of work with you and everything will be happy. This is the exact same nonsense from the exact same people, from Allison Graham and from Henry Kissinger, that they spun on Nixon in the late 60s about Russia. Let's go back in time.
Yeah.
The same exact pitch. Russia's a rising power. America's a declining power. And what we have to do, we need détente. We need rapprochement. We need to let them have their sphere of influence. It was bullshit then, and it's bullshit now. Ronald Reagan came in and said, hey, you know what? How big is their economy? And they said, Russia's economy is the size of California.
Yeah.
He says, why do people fear him? The very first thing that Andy Marshall at the Net Assessment Group in the Pentagon and Bill Casey, the CIA, did was do a complete analysis of the Russian economy. And they found out it was only half as big. Oops, I have a miss. 50% bigger.
And they were desperately short dollars.
Desperately short of dollars. This is the whole thing that always happens.
Exactly where China is.
It's because they did the exact same thing in China. They put it into military spending that was not productive. So here we go with the exact same set of guys. And what they tell us 40, 50 years later, hey, America's a declining power. China's a rising power. And I look at it, it's the exact same thing. They have an economy with no dollars. Here's the point I make to them. How about this? How about we stop being a declining power? That is not a law of physics. A process that manages us to decline, okay, is not a process I accept. I am looking for a leader to step up and make America great again, okay? And that's Trump's basic pitch. And guess what? In 2 years, he proved the Chinese are a paper tiger.
When you think about, again, their grand strategy, our pushback, and where we are in the globe today, what do you think China's next step is? If you were predicting what their next step would be, given our assertiveness that we've stepped forward on the economic, call it, side of the coin and pushed in some tariffs and are starting to reassert ourselves.
You see,
what do you think they're going to do?
Number one, they want regime.
What's textbook?
They want regime change in the United States. They believe they have a 80% chance of getting Trump, winning the House, doing whatever they need to do with psychological warfare, with money, with whatever they have to do to basically thwart Trump and lose the House of Representatives, see him impeached this year, and 100% probability they'll beat him in 2020. Number one is the removal of Donald J. Trump as President of the United States.
Okay.
Because they say that is the railhead of everything that's happened to us badly. And we've got to get a globalist in there.
Their game's just to wait him out.
Not just wait him out. I think take active measures. Now, yesterday, Pence said yesterday, and Axios and other people reported there's classified information that shows the Chinese involvement and real meddling. This is not some Russia guys on Facebook. This is the real deal, because this is all the chips in the middle of the table. That's number one. Number two, I think what you're seeing, the Italians said today that hey, China's going to be our big buddy. I think you're going to see a double and triple down on One Belt, One Road. I think you'll see a double and triple down on Made in China 2025. I think you'll see the East India project in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Caribbean, in Venezuela, in Latin America. I think they're going to double and triple down. They got a lot of RMB to spend, right? And if a guy can take RMB,
but no one's going to take RMB.
Well, this is going to be the great question we're going to have in front of us. Because they're in the Gulf right now. They're all over the UAE. They're all over Saudi Arabia. They're all over Qatar. They're all over every resource area in the world, from Argentina to Sub-Saharan Africa to South Africa, and they're going to try to see it geopolitically. The number three, because remember, in the great textbook that they put out and basically printed in English in the late 90s, written by these two brilliant colonels in the Chinese War College, called Unconventional Warfare. Unconventional Warfare.
Admiral Liu.
It's a book that should be read by everybody. Is that because it laid out China's strategy. They said there's three types of warfare. There's information warfare, there's economic warfare, and there's kinetic, or kind of guns up warfare. And what we want to do is avoid kinetic. Because the one thing America can do is kick your ass, right? So we want to avoid that, okay? And so let's focus on information and economic warfare. And they've run the tables. I mean, it's textbook. You go back and read that. They've done exactly what they said they're going to do. I think, and I believe, that given the fact that Trump is now converging all forces of government power onto the economic warfare, and they are taken back, and the regime is under huge pressure, because I believe the Deng Xiaoping faction and others, even at the highest level, who believe in collective leadership, have said, hey, what we have here is a cult of personality.
You mean the ones that haven't been jailed or killed yet?
The ones that haven't been jailed or killed yet have sat there and go, Deng believed in working with the West.
Yeah.
Deng believed in reform. Deng believed in opening up. But Deng believed in being a good partner. And particularly, keep your lights down. Don't get up in somebody's grill. That what they see with Xi is a return to the cult of personality of Mao.
Yes.
And he's under tremendous pressure internally.